Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I should say. And I'm Laura, and welcome to today's panel discussion, physical panel discussion and CC-Webinar.Live session on a topical wholesale industry. We would like to thank Telecall for sponsoring the session. And now I would like to invite our moderator, Arun, who will moderate this panel. So over to you, Arun, and enjoy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arun Dahiri. Thank you for the introduction and for another very fantastically organized event by the Carrier community. Thank you, Laura and Rita, for including me in this again. So what I wanted to do is just to initially kick off by introducing the panelists. We've got some fantastic people, experts with us today. So if we could just spend a few seconds going around the table. So I'll start off. My name is Aaron. I'm the MD of a consultancy business called Red Dawn Consulting, and we specialize in all things telecoms, media, and technology. So I'd like to welcome you all, and please, perhaps Stefan, if you start.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the guy local on site. Stefan Öfner, my name. I'm from Deutsche Telekom, and I'm in charge for the mobile wholesale / MVNO business in all of our European operations, with the small exception of Germany. So working with MVNOs, branded resellers, national roaming service providers, plus any type of new business opportunity that we see beyond the traditional forms of business that we do.
Thank you. So who's next? Perhaps Angela?
Yeah, I'm the head of sales for Telecall. Okay, Telecall is a full MVNO in Brazil. Okay, I take care of the international part. I take care of the A2P voice and connectivity. And that's it. Yeah, I'm physically based in Miami. Okay.
Thank you. Alistair?
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, Alistair Elliott from Pod Group. So I'm the CTO networks for Pod Group and also the CEO of the solutions division. So at Pod Group, we're IoT MVNO, and we're actually extending into other services beyond IoT traditional services. And I look after network relationships for the company, as well as I say solution development and a lot of business development activities as well.
Paul?
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Basser of Digitalk. We provide an MVNE as a service platform, mobile cloud. It's a complete prepaid, postpaid platform with full MVNO options. And we work with both the mobile operators to provide an MVNE platform that they can use to onboard multiple MVNOs, or with individual MVNOs to integrate into the mobile operator to support their service.
Danny?
Hi, I'm Danny Preschool, a co-founder of a telecom specialized law firm, and we've advised MNOs, MVNOs, MVNEs, anyone in the mobile ecosystem throughout the world, often working alongside Red Dawn Consulting, where they're providing the strategic and consulting outfits. So very happy to put a legal and regulatory insight into this panel.
Great, thank you. Okay, so what I wanted to do is to start off by defining what this topic is all about. So we've got building blocks and we've got mobile wholesale. So I wanted to start just very quickly with mobile wholesale to propose a definition and expand our thinking beyond what we're kind of used to. So in terms of mobile wholesale, we're talking about companies that distribute a service over mobile, but do not own the infrastructure. So they all have one thing in common, which is that they rely on networks for connectivity. So that's kind of what we mean by mobile wholesale in this context. And obviously, as we go through, you can challenge that on the panel. And the second point is what are the building blocks? And there are 4 building blocks that I'd like to kind of just throw on the table, and that will help us to navigate through this conversation. So the first one is about the network layer, the network and connectivity. So that's about the airtime. And the second piece is the platform. So that's the BSS, OSS platform. The third layer are the services, the value-added services that sit on top of that. And I'd like to propose a fourth layer, which is kind of new and emerging that we're getting involved in quite a lot, which is a development layer, in the sense that integration with third parties, such as social media, banks, retailers. So now we have to think of ourselves in a much wider ecosystem. And indeed, retailers who have no clue about mobile need to understand these four layers, and we as a body need to help them to get their services from the network. So with that, I'd like to start with the questions. So the first the question that I'd like to ask the panelists, and we have a good mixture of individuals from the network themselves and from all the way right through to platform and to the service layer. So we should be able to cover off the whole areas of the building blocks. So this is about specifically wholesale segments. And I'd like to ask the question, what new wholesale segments do we think are emerging for us to think about to target? So who would like to start? Shall we start with Angelo?
Yes, I can talk about it. When we launched the MVNO here in Brazil, okay, we are full MVNO in Brazil. We had a huge demand locally. Okay, Brazil has less than 1% penetration for the MVNOs. Okay, so it's a very big country, 220 million people, and you have close to 10,000 ISPs, you know, all over the country. Okay, so so there is a huge demand for them, you know, to provide the mobile services for their, you know, end customers. And also in our side, we are also adding, you know, some, you know, value-added services as you mentioned, like a banking, parent control, and other things that can add value to their, you know, platforms, their communication to their customers. Okay, and on the international side, we have been approaching the international community, not only carriers, but companies that take care of the connectivity of you know, devices, cars, or whatever that wants to have a connection into Brazil. Okay, Brazil has a very special particularity that the permanent roaming is not allowed. Okay, so anyone that wants to be connected to the network has to come through a local, you know, partner, and they have been serving this international community, and that's like a new wholesale division for us. We have been approaching this market for the last 2 years. Okay, we launched the operation by the end of last year. It's a different sales cycle. We have been our background is the relationships with carriers. Okay, and now suddenly you are talking to companies that take care of the connectivity of like big groups, like the, you know, the car manufacturers. Okay, and so it's a different approach, different way of selling. But I think it's the future that is happening right now. Okay.
So I'd like to ask Alistair, from the point of view of IoT, what sort of segments are you seeing emerging?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, same for us, IoT. I mean, really, we tackle with everything. We don't focus on particular segments in the market, but you know, we're sort of quite broad spectrum. I mean, we've come from the telematics space, and that's really where IoT started, a lot of end-to-end services. And really, for us, we're branching out into new markets. We've got some big projects in the US, for instance, in utilities. Got some enterprise customers as well that use our connectivity. And certainly with things like COVID at the moment, there's opportunities in healthcare as well. So we're seeing some sort of new growth areas coming into the fore. But I think really for us as well, we're actually looking at how we can leverage our capabilities beyond IoT as well. So like you were talking before, Aaron, about building blocks, you know, we have a lot of building blocks in our capabilities, and certainly some of the new emerging areas like you know, youth sector, where we're doing parental control service, or maybe the elderly sector as well. So some of those functions and markets aren't being served traditionally well by the operators, and it opens opportunities for us as well as a provider, because you have those building blocks in place in the network.
Okay. So Paul, I know you are exposed to some interesting segments. Would you like to share some ideas about what you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we work with quite a variety. So, I mean, we're working with sort of some traditional segments, which would include prepaid international calling, for example, the traditional ethnic MVNO models. We work with large retail organizations, with energy companies who are essentially, to some extent, providing customer services capabilities and can offer multiple services underneath that. And then we're increasingly getting into as well. I mean, we also work with mobile operator sub-brands. So some of that is in the budget space. Some of that just a slightly different proposition from the main brand. So it allows, we provide a kind of capability that allows them to differentiate their sub-brand services from the main brand service. But we are also working with companies who are providing sort of new propositions, whether that's in relation to health type services, related to people with particular disabilities perhaps. So services that are quite distinctly targeted in terms of what the capability is that they get on the mobile device from the standard calling service. So that may include devices which are particularly targeted for the elderly, for example, or for a service that would support perhaps people with hearing loss and so on. So, and that's based on Digitalk as a platform provider providing all the core capabilities and the interfaces that are necessary to support that service, but then integrating into particular environments and platforms that support the particular aspects of that service.
Thank you. And Danny, what are you seeing in your kind of world as emerging segments?
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few, we've been involved in the automotive car industry. I mean, all the cars being connected, coming with embedded SIMs, various devices in IoT and going, taking global. And what I would say to, especially panelists and people in the room, once you take your IoT product on an international basis, you do have to be quite careful about the regulatory aspects of it, because you may need to find that either you or your partners there will need telecommunications licenses, because effectively you're providing connectivity to the end user. So you do need to make sure all the way down the chain that the relevant people in that chain have the relevant licenses, and you need to address it right away. But in terms of the segmentation, just a range of telematics and automotive functionality. But what is interesting that hasn't been mentioned so far is the 5G, specifically 5G related services. And I'm actually in London. I've got my mobile. Can't see very well. It's 5G, but it doesn't work very well. And I think that will come onto some of the network slicing and see, where we get to. And I'd be very interested to hear from the panelists if they've got any plans for 5G. And clearly, from me on the legal point of view, we need to make sure that there are going to be appropriate SLAs to back that up. But
we'll come on to the 5G. So we'll come. I think we can address the 5G. So when we talk about growth strategies, I think what I'd like to do is ask Stefan the same question, and then obviously that will lead us nicely onto the next question as well. So Stefan, let's see what you're witnessing in your. I know you have multiple countries under your wing, and you have a lot of expertise with lots of different segments. So what are you seeing as being kind of emerging and exciting?
Well, my perspective is probably a bit European-centric here, but obviously we see coming top-down from consumer business split, consumer markets in Western Europe at least are highly mature now. We see markets where we have 60 to 70 mobile brands being active there, out of which only 3 operate on main brands, maybe another 3 or 4 second brands, but then a sheer number of parties offering mobile services. Obviously, especially in the low end, it's not that the market just needs another consumer mass market player here. But I guess also Paul referred to the example of the hearing loss proposition. And I guess if we look at the UK example of Goshawk and the Russia, that's a nice example of that there are still very specific sweet spots in the consumer area where there is a significant niche opening up that can be addressed with needs that are not served from what is there yet. Obviously, the further we go down to our markets in Southeastern Europe, we see that these are lagging behind. So there's still open potential there also in the consumer. But I guess also referring to what the colleague said, the big future topics probably more around B2B, and it's not only IoT. If I look at what the operators do in the 5G context, they're surely placing their big bets, but I guess there was numerous opportunities to work on the 5G features, addressing verticals, interesting industry segments with specific solutions. And the playing field here is so wide, actually, that there are plenty of opportunities for MVNO type of players.
Okay. So I just wanted to add a couple of points before coming back to you, Stefan, on the setup with operators. So I think what we're witnessing as being, or we find interesting, are sort of what I call them mega wholesale players, or super MVNOs, you could call them. So, for example, I think the media companies are sort of looking, and the big internet sort of, talk about Facebook, Google, but these huge companies looking at wholesale, and what would be interesting is to see, you know, Amazon, those sorts of companies, what they might end up doing if they start owning some of the mobile infrastructure, or at least wholesale. And I think that what's important to understand is that the data analytics aspect of that is very powerful for them, and also having sort of more control over the bidding relationship, I think, is something which is going to, I think, take off more. We're also seeing more wholesale and enterprise to have more sort of control over the user experience. And IoT seems to be quite a significant one. And the reason for that is because IoT needs a special kind of interaction with the customers, and that skill set doesn't always sit very comfortably within the operators. So that's what we're seeing as the big ones. I think we as a sort of industry need to think a little bit beyond traditional kind of mobile players and think about retailers and media companies and think about how we adjust our, open up our networks and platforms to serve them. So that leads us on to the next question, which is about the setup with an operator. And we have obviously Stefan, who is from an operator. So in this case, my question is, you know, what do we need? What would you like to see to create a win-win setup or relationship with a mobile operator? Yeah. Stefan, would you like to sort of tell us what you would like to see there?
I mean, it pretty much depends on what the strength of the potential partner is and what he brings on the table. Coming from one end, we've done a couple of deals with retailers in our footprint recently that basically have a solid brand, have a huge distribution network, but have no mobile capabilities. And then they either take the help of the enabling segment, or we as an operator basically equip them with the right platforms so that they can just plug in their brand and their sales network and make it happen. And in a few of our markets, we have established we call it multi-brand platforms, where we can plug in a new retailer in 3 to 4 months. That's the one extreme. Like on the other extreme, you have the super MVNOs, as you say them, people that have all the credibility and all the capabilities in place and just need to switch on the radio from one MNO after the other. And in between, there's a huge area that you can play upon. I guess basically from a host perspective, I guess you have to play the full range of opportunities. If you cannot do it by yourself, you have a number of credible partners out there that can help you with the enabling segment. But in order to play the full range, you just need to meet the customer where his strengths are, and then have your own technology help him, or have his technology being plugged into your system, and just remain very flexible and not stick to, let's say, off-the-shelf models, either take this or this and that's it, but take every partner as a project and find the best win-win solution with him.
Yeah. And do you have any sort of comments on pricing? how you think wholesale should be priced? Are there any new ideas we can learn from you?
Not necessarily new ideas, but actually the same what I referred to for technology applies for the pricing piece, let's say, except for the very small segment where you have multiple small parties where just the effort of connecting them may be too much of a hassle, where we like to rely on MVNAs, on aggregators to do the long tail for us. We have a bit of a toolbox of different pricing models, but any project with at least small, medium-sized partner for us is an open discussion on which model works best. And I agree that with data growth and with IoT features, we have to come up with even more new pricing models. But I guess the worst thing you can do as an operator is saying, I have this one model, eat or die, that will not gonna fly.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask that question to Danny, because Danny and I worked together on some negotiations between large wholesale players and operators, and we come across obstacles and benefits of working with certain operators. So Danny, do you have any comments on what we should think about when we are setting up a relationship or contract with an operator?
Yeah, good point. I mean, I think that from my experience, the mobile network operators that I've been dealing with, when they enter into an MVNO agreement currently with a sort of IoT provider, really using almost the outdated model of bulk minutes, and I think they need to understand that we're moving to IoT. There are going to be new solutions, and actually, I think the MNOs need to be able to show to the market that IoT and eventually 5G is going to be a sustainable model and lots of new features which will increase the value of the whole ecosystem. And I've just found them a little bit unworkable, some of the agreements and the pricing strategies for when you're really looking at IoT SIMs, when you've got very, very low data potentially on each SIM. I think that the pricing per SIM, there needs to be a lot of flexibility. I also think that if you want innovation, which I think everyone on this call and in the audience wants to see, there's got to be some flexibility in the pricing to really ensure that the MVNOs succeed in delivering the IoT model. So, I think that some of the minimum revenue commitments per year really seem a bit outdated, and actually will end up shooting everyone in the foot, because they're just disproportionate to maybe the likely revenue in the first few years. I think the MNOs have got to, this is my view, embrace some of these new solutions and really work with them to help make the MVNOs work, because otherwise, I think as an industry, we may miss out on some of the opportunities. And actually, they may find out that some of the Silicon Valley giants find different ways to approach the market, which bypasses the ecosystem. So that's just my view. I think this old school, there needs to be a policy shift at some of the MNOs to really embrace the new IoT solutions and help make them work.
Yeah,
you've seen that, Aaron.
Yes, absolutely. I think I'll comment at the end with a couple of additional points, but I wanted to ask MVNO actually. So Angelo, in terms of from your experience, what would you have liked to have seen better in your relationship when negotiating with an operator?
Yeah, it's a very how can I say, strange relationship, because you are very close, but you cannot be too close. Yeah. But since the beginning, we have been trying to show them that we want to be like a partner to add, like a revenue, streams that they are not, able to take care. Like Stephen said, that they have when they have like a small player that wants to join, they want to use like an MVNA. So we want to try to position ourselves, to help them with these small and medium-sized players. Okay, we are in an era where everyone is talking about the digital transformation, to improve the customer experience. And we're not talking only about the big brands or big companies. We have some, small groups or like local groups, especially in a country like Brazil, where they want to join, the party as well. Okay, and we are there to better serve them. And in some cases, our relationship is with Vivo in Brazil, which is the largest MNO in Brazil. Okay, it's Telefónica's MNO. And in some cases, they forward, some customers to us because they look at to us as a partner, to help them to aggregate all these people that wants to join, this digital transformation. And we are not, since the beginning also, we never thought like, okay, we want to compete with all the MNOs. No, we want to find our niche. I've been talking a lot about the IoT here. So it's a niche space as well, not just related to the verticals, but also to the connectivity, to be able to enable the connectivity for anyone who wants to, to join the network, okay? And not just locally, but also using our international relationships with the carriers and with the companies that we know, to aggregate them and put them in the network. Because again, this permanent roaming issue in Brazil is a big topic. Like I don't know if you guys are, if you know about it. So it's a big topic. So anyone who wants to come to Brazil needs the local partner and want to serve that. And sometimes, they are like a big group. They're not able to be present there, and we are there. Okay.
Yeah. So, Paul, I think you've done some aggregation, I believe. So in terms of having that was mentioned before by Stefan. So do you have any comments to make on that specific point about building a relationship with an operator?
Yes, I mean, the way we work, so for example, if we work with the operator and we're providing, as it were, their MVNE platform that enables them to onboard multiple MVNOs, then we are both providing a technology platform that provides essentially the applications, the service capabilities that enables that mobile operator to offer different services to different MVNOs. But we also provide a kind of a service that enables supports the process of onboarding that MVNO. So, I mean, MVNOs come from different perspectives. They may bring a lot of telecoms experience in some examples, and in other examples, they may have much less of that. They know all about their business, but maybe less about what sits behind the telecoms business. And so what we do is we work with both the mobile operator and the MVNO to be able to address their proposition, look at what they're trying to achieve, look at who they're trying to target, and relate that to the capabilities that we're offering so that we can say, okay, here's the best way to support this approach, and then potentially offer some additional capabilities that may not have been considered. And then we essentially package that up so that then we can enable that service, working with the MVNOs so that, as I say, it addresses their particular market, addresses their service requirements, but we can follow through on the process and support them in terms of launching that service. And it's an important part of the role we play as an MVNE platform provider, as well as the actual technology and the capability itself.
So you've led us very nicely into the next topic about platforms, but I just wanted to ask Alistair before we do that, Paul, in terms of IoT, and to understand, to pick up on Danny's point about IoT being, challenging in terms of securing the right sort of deal. Do you have any feedback or requirements or requests from operators to make things better?
Yeah, I mean, obviously from our perspective, we're coming from the IoT industry anyway. So when we engage with the operators, they know the services that we provide. But I think really it's just trying to get alignment with the operator concerned. And, we have so many different operator relationships. They do tackle it in different ways, but successful relationships are where the operators are fully supporting us in the market. So you might start off with one commercial model, but then as you bring in new opportunities or new projects, they can look at pricing on a case-by-case basis to support you. And I think that's probably the most important part, is having the relationship where you can discuss and change the commercial model as things evolve, because what suited 5 years ago doesn't suit today. It may not suit you in a few years' time. So having something which is evolving and flexible is certainly the key to a successful relationship.
That makes sense. In fact, that's triggered an idea that I want to share. So I think the flexibility point is very important, because a new entrant doesn't really know which way it's going to go. Is it going to be huge volume, or is it going to require a new pricing package because of some new entrant that has reduced prices, or has some new technology arisen? So there are a couple of points that I think would be helpful in my wish list. So one of the things is, whenever we're doing a deal, we generally get asked by the operator for a minimum revenue commitment, which says that we'll launch you as long as you commit to this kind of revenue going forward. And we find that quite stifling, and it doesn't help people get off the ground. It frightens some people to actually do a deal. So it's a bit of an odd situation, because the operator will say, what is your forecast? You give a forecast, and that becomes your commitment. So then the new entrant is incentivized to give a low forecast. So when you give a low forecast, the operator says, well, we're not big enough. So it's a very, I find that a very sort of frustrating component of a deal. The second point, which I think is also fairly frustrating in the way that we work, and I think this is an easy fix, is that it's very difficult to know when the operator stops and the wholesale partner starts. So what services, what is the suite of services that an operator is offering? So for example, if they had some sort of clear menu, and it says that we can provide you with obviously network call control, we can provide you with switching, obviously that's to do with, unless you're a full MVNO, that's standard, but also we can provide you with analytics, maybe some billing capabilities, maybe some service development capabilities, maybe some distribution, maybe some customer care. And if there's some services the operator can offer on a wholesale basis, which ordinarily would be taken care of by a full MVNO, I think that is something which I think would help new entrants understand how to launch new services, if they knew that this is what I can get from you and how much it would cost. And the reason for that is because when you set up an operation, the cost and the time involved of doing a deal, can take 6 months, a year, because it's not clear, who is doing what in the whole overall service. That's my kind of contribution to that question. I'd like us to move on to, and I'd like to ask Paul this one, seeing as it's about platforms. So, Paul, the question is about how we can develop innovation by using platforms. Yeah. So, if you give us some tricks as to what the platforms can do for us, that would be most welcome.
Sure. I mean, the role, I guess, as an MVNE provider that we provide is providing a layer. I mean, you were describing that there are multiple layers earlier on, and we provide a layer that essentially surrounds the network and offers up capabilities from the network that can be exploited by the MVNO. So the key capabilities that we provide are to provide relatively simple and straightforward applications that enable a service provider, an MVNO, to have flexibility around the services they're offering over the top of the network capability available. So whether that's individual network features, down to policy control, charging options, enabling distinct features, enabling different types of communications, detecting events on the network, whether that's a subscriber attaching to the network at a particular location. We absorb that, as it were, information and points of control across the network, and then make it available to the MVNO so that they've then got flexibility to use that and exploit it to support their particular service. So our role then is to provide the applications that enable them to configure a service, to configure the points of interaction with their customers on the network, to enable distinct features, to package them together as products. And then we provide APIs, as well as our own applications, APIs out so that the MVNO can integrate to that platform and control it as they wish. I mean, typically we find that initially, if you've got a new startup MVNO, then what they need is ready-made suite of applications that they can take out of the box, be set up and configured, and they can go ahead and roll out their service. As you get further down the line, the service grows, the MVNO becomes more sophisticated in their approach as to how they're dealing with their customers. Then they may want to take control of some of those aspects themselves, and that's where our APIs come into play, so that we can essentially hand off to them and they can manage that from their point of view. So particular tricks, not so much, more about what's the way in which to offer the capabilities of the network and adjunct services. There could be third-party services included into that. What's the best way in which to offer those up to the MVNO such that they have a straightforward way of configuring their products and services, configuring the charges that go along with those, and managing their customers in relation to those services. So we provide a suite of self-care applications, whether that's a web self-care application, various messaging points of integration so that the customer can interact with the service provider. We provide business intelligence and campaigns capabilities so that the operator, the MVNO, can build their own campaigns, target communications with their particular customers. But then again, we have the APIs that enable them, if they wish to take some of that on board themselves and just integrate into our platform and use its capabilities. But what we're giving them is an interface into the network and the services that it provides that they can exploit.
Brilliant. So can I ask Stefan that question in terms of platforms? What do you like to see from your platform partners?
I mean, we as an MNO group are basically see our key contribution into wanting, in case of DT, a superior network in the market with excellent quality across the country. And then we are kind of relying on the creativity of the MVNO or the MVNE partner to give us ideas which new kind of APIs, interfaces they would actually need to give a new twist to the proposition. Here we basically have a very open approach. We don't really have kind of modular boxes, but we are open to discuss any new idea and see what we can contribute on our side of the network, on the side of the APIs here, to make a feature available. And just received a couple of requests earlier this week, new APIs, and we look into it, and then we make it available, provided it's secure and safe for both of us. But I guess also in this instant, we need to have, let's say, a sound interplay with the MVNEs and the MVNAs, so that we both, to the benefit of the MVNOs, make such innovation possible here. And I guess there was no competition between us and the enablers, but rather a cooperation to bring the right features so that the MVNOs with the really cool new ideas can actually make it happen.
Great, thank you. So I just want to open up to anyone else about that question about platforms. So Andre, Alistair, or Danny, do you have any comments to make on that one before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I can make a quick comment on it. I think from our perspective, yeah, we come from both our own platforms and the operator platforms, and I think the key for the MVNO is really having that flexibility, because they don't necessarily always want to rely on the MNO for the innovation or their vendor. They want to rely on their own technology or their own capabilities as well. So it's just trying to get the right balance as well. And certainly for new entrants, they probably come from a very clean sheet. If they're working with a good vendor like Digitalk, then perhaps they've got a good suite in the box already. But it's just trying to get the balance of capabilities and functionality available, and then trying to evolve for future requirements as well, because things do change. There's new market opportunities which come up, but you don't want to find yourself entrenched in the market, down the line where you can't support a new service because you haven't got that capability, or there's a big sunk cost to be made to get that capability in the network.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I just want to add one point to that before we move on to the final question, which is about. So I think that from a innovation with platforms perspective, I think there are two things. One is that we're seeing MNOs using platforms to develop their own sub-branded propositions, as Paul had mentioned before, and using that as a test bed to migrate their legacy platforms onto that new platform. So I think if we have a clever platform strategy, then or a flexible platform strategy, then we can use a platform for future innovation, not just for wholesale, but also for the main retail organization. That's one innovation that we're seeing. And the second one is really around sort of platforms that allow multiple services to be built, multiple. So we're talking about m-commerce, we're talking about loyalty programs, points management, we're talking about media and fixed line and mobile, internet, all kind of being able to be built, but with sort of a discount structure or in a clever way that the customer can understand. And the other sort of big innovation we're seeing is around self-care to bring the operational costs down. So, once you've integrated with third parties, then you've got self-care, and the customer then more in control of their own user experience. But these are the big kind of big ticket innovations that we're witnessing in our consultancy world, which kind of leads me on to the last question, which is more of a sort of wildcard question, which is about growth strategies. So, where do we see growth coming from in wholesale? So we've got 3 dimensions really. We've got pure revenue streams, which includes value-added services. We've got channels, which channels to market, and we've got partners, all of which have been mentioned so far. So perhaps Stefan might be a good person to kind of start off that question, and then perhaps we move to Angelo in terms of MVNO. What do you think?
Thanks. Well, obviously we do not expect, let's say, the next big mass market MVNO to pop up in the Netherlands or in Germany. It's just a pretty mature market. So I guess we have to look more at the long tail, and I guess in my earlier statement I emphasized a bit on that we have to be able to serve multiple smaller markets or brands in a very efficient way, very fast. For example, retailers and so forth. So I guess here operators or MVNs have to work on a platform that just that is able or capable to onboard just another brand very quickly, very flexible, to serve just a couple of more attractive consumer niches here. But then on growth, obviously, and I guess that's repeating to what I said earlier, I guess the big exciting new playground is obviously then, as I said, 5G IoT, where we will find many new areas, verticals, mentioned e-health, low latency services, edge computing. We have a very nice customer out there that is, for example, migrating private Tetra radio networks, where the customer used to build up like his own campus radio network, old-fashioned radio, and migrated this to LTE-based push-to-talk mission-critical communication. Excellent service. Happy to deploy further markets with that customer. And these are kind of the sweet spots where we'd like to push ahead, and we're open for any kind of new idea and prospect coming us with a great new idea. But it's quite a diverse field. If I would have the full transparency of what would be the next big bet, I wouldn't be on the MNO side, but I would launch my MVNO, right? So pretty much open to the great, cool, and fancy ideas that are on the market, and let's have a chat.
Okay. Angelo, in terms of, from your perspective, what are your growth strategies going forward?
Yeah, when I come to these panels that most of you are based in Europe, and when I go to Europe, I see that you are, let's say, ahead of what is happening in Brazil right now. As I mentioned, the MVNO market share is like less than 1%, so we still have a lot of opportunities to explore. So let's say, I would say that we are on a step, let's say the market here is a step behind us, what Stephen just commented. And here we have like a bunch of opportunities, like on the IoT side, the network is still not mature. They're still about to launch the NB-IoT, or the CATAM network is still not live, okay, from the viewer perspective. So it's going to allow different verticals also to join, the network. Okay, here also we have the simple fact that you allow like an ISP to provide, like the mobile services together with any value added that we add here. We are exploring also, it's not live yet, but we have like the mobile banking live very soon. It's a project here, and in the same way that you see, let's say, money flowing from Europe towards Africa. In Brazil, we have from the northeast towards the southeast, and vice versa. So it is a huge opportunity. On the IoT side, is again, we are a step behind. We still have a lot of things to go on. So we had this idea that Stefan said. We launched our MVNO, and I think we're exploring that. It is happening. Okay, we launched. We have Linksfield, which is a giant on the IoT field, like the Chinese company, and they are exploring already the network here, launching their devices in the network. So I think we have a very good field here to explore, and it is happening. Okay, it is live here.
Thank you. So, Danny, you mentioned 5G earlier on. I thought we could just sort of finish up on that kind of point in terms of what do we think is going to drive growth in the 5G world? Any ideas?
Is that well, I think the first thing is we have to have the network in place for anything which is mission critical to be able to rely on 5G, and to an extent, it's cart before the horse, as we would say, because it's going to, anyone trying to launch a 5G service now where the 5G element is absolutely critical, it's going to have to enter into a very specific deal with the MNO and really make sure that they've got the SLAs in place, because, as I alluded to before, I've got 5G, but when I sometimes try to look at something on my cell phone, I get that horrible circle, where it's waiting to download. Sometimes I have no connectivity at all. It completely drops off. I get the 5G symbol. And then it's the equipment connected to that you're running off the back, in terms of routers. They can't transmit it on at 5G. So, I think clearly the MNOs have got to come up with a solution, internally, to make sure that they can do the network slicing, to make sure that 5G capacity is there throughout the network and service. And then in terms of the innovative services on the back of it, we've read a lot about healthcare, remote operations in the medical sphere, but really we shall see. I've actually seen some MVNOs, maybe not 5G, coming into the aviation sector, and I think when the aviation sector gets back to what it was, I think there are going to be some opportunities there in terms of just the logistics involved in the airline industry. They're going to need to become more efficient and save costs. So I think there's going to be some IoT internal opportunities for the airline industry, but not necessarily 5G as such.
And thank you. So, Alistair, do you have any points about where we think growth is coming?
Yeah, I mean, 5G is certainly going to be something to look at, but as I think as Danny is saying, really we need to wait for the network. I think for us at the moment, we're focused on, I suppose, more immediate terms in the next few years as what we can achieve. And certainly looking forward to what 5G can bring, we're looking at developments now in the market, things like private LTE, for instance, which is a key growth area for us. So certainly looking at more niche opportunities, but leveraging, I suppose, and really putting the preparation of what's going to come down the line. Certainly things like private LTE and security are going to be key factors for us in IT.
So do you think network slicing will be a sort of important contributor to that?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, that's really what we mean by private LTE, is being able to provide a private LTE core to an enterprise or a utility type customer, letting them run their own network services on that core. And that'll be the prelude to coming into 5G services in the future. They can certainly use the technology now because it's available, and then with 5G they can move into that.
Interesting. Well, any final comments on growth? Where you think growth will come from?
I'm a bit like Stefan in the sense that we're on the provider side of things in terms of the platform, but the progressive digitalization of platforms and services, that 5G is essentially bringing to a point of completion, in the sense that it's much more of a web services architecture right through the capability. The distribution of network capabilities out to the edge, or processing capabilities out to the edge. So our role again is to sort of be able to deliver those capabilities up to the MVNO to allow them to build propositions around that. But the key point is around the flexibility to support a broad range of distinct propositions that are targeted to different markets. I mean, some of it's at the basics level, maybe sort of expansion of fixed wireless access as the almost sort of more common model of providing broadband access to core networks, so that you've got a sort of nomadic capability as well as a sort of fixed line broadband and a lower grade, as it were, mobile broadband. You've actually got a very high bandwidth nomadic capability that you can support at that level. So, but I'm sure there are, you know, as referenced, there are lots of distinct services that can be offered over a 5G network to support different services, and our role is to provide the capabilities to enable them.
Brilliant. So I just wanted to thank you very much. I wanted to sort of answer that question as well, but before I do that, I wanted to just ask if the audience has got any questions, get them ready, because I'll ask the audience and anyone on the attendees on the online to start getting their questions ready, because we're at that stage. But I think that in terms of growth strategies, my sort of prediction for some of the things that might go crazy in the next few years, I think, particularly with 5G. I think streaming services is something that would, you know, I think really start to take off. So we're now voice calling alone is kind of diminishing in favor of video calling, and now we're so used to, with the COVID, so used to being on the end of a video call now, and that's become a norm. So I think streaming is something which is going to be, I think, very important, particularly with the media companies I mentioned who are looking to enter the market, and that includes social media. So I think information will, and documentaries and films and media will be versioned in sort of smaller bite-sized chunks rather than long you know, movies. So I think that's a big shift in the content side of things to support that demand. So the other big thing is virtual reality. I think will really sort of take off, not quite in the near term, but mid-term, in terms of advertisers looking at selling their services using virtual reality, you know, in terms of things like, you know, holidays, to look at what you're buying before you buy it or go there. Artificial intelligence, I think, is going to be a huge, sort of, particularly from a platform perspective, to look at understanding customers and bring down the cost to serve. I think the relationships with the companies such as insurance companies, health companies, banks, is going to get stronger to mix analytics connectivity with the service, which kind of leads to security. And I think that we're now sort of relying more and more on mobile for security, be that CCTV or be that alerting or find out where your family is, etc. And then to Alice's good point about utilities, I think they will potentially start to want to leverage their infrastructure capabilities and mindset to move more into kind of telecommunications mindset and control some of that infrastructure, all enabled by 5G and network slicing. That's kind of, I think it's a good time to kind of ask the audience now. If there are any questions. Laura, are you there? Are there anyone in the audience that we want to ask any questions?
Our audience is quiet, the online audience, and here as well, because we at the end of our event. So no questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the attendees online?
No, we don't.
Okay, so is it okay if I wrap up then?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank the the panelists for a fantastic debate, and I think we've kind of learned a lot in terms of the building blocks, what we need to make this all work. I think my sort of feedback is I think we're still scope for us to think a little bit more outside the box, a little bit more about new kinds of company that might enter the market, how we can use our infrastructure more creatively and build stronger relationships between operators, platforms, and MVNOs and OTTs and IoT, etc. So I think there's, in my sort of takeaway from all this is that some people might say, well, this is a standard part of the industry. It's a steady state. But I think if we play our cards right, there's plenty of growth to come if we unpick some of these blockers that we discussed today. So thank you very much. Does anybody want to make any more comments before we close off? So Laura, is it a good time to finish?
It's a good time to finish. So, dear participants, we are at the end of the session, and I would like to thank Arun for moderating and panelists for joining. And also I would like to thank our audience, both online and physical, for joining and listening. This was the last panel of this year's GCCM Berlin events. See you in our future physical panels and also in our CC-Webinar.Live sessions. Until next time, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.